So, after the longest time of the meta being relatively stale, especially from the sniper perspective, Raven really shook things up with Season 3, and there's a ton of weapons that you want to be looking at in your saved loadouts, because while today we broke down everything that came along with Season 3's launch so far, we didn't really get around to talking too much about the meta and weapon changes, because there was just so many of them that if we did it, that video would probably be doubled in length, and it was already a lengthy video at that. So, figured it was probably best to break this up into two parts. So in this one, we're covering all the weapon changes with Season 3. As we go along, drop your thoughts down below. Are you guys a fan of some of these changes, perhaps to the sniper changes, the other weapon tuning? Whatever the case, are you a fan of them? Maybe not so much. Drop your thoughts down below. But if you enjoyed the video, you find it at all insightful, do me a favor and drop a like on the video. And if you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button to stay updated with all things Warzone Season 3, Modern Warfare 2 here very soon, and anything COD related. And finally, with Season 3 here, a little reminder that if you guys would like to support the channel a little further while picking up the Battle Pass or any other items in-game, you can use creator code ESPRESSO in the support a creator function. Truly, do not ever feel pressure to do so, but if you'd like to do so, tweet me a picture. I'd love to shout out some of your generous support in upcoming videos. That said, let's jump right into it. So, let's talk about these changes. Let's start with perhaps the biggest of changes, the sniper meta. Admittedly, I think this is well overdue. I still think it's a little too early on, having not had enough games really to get my first-hand account up to where I want to be to say, yes, these were good or bad changes, but overall, in terms of shaking up that sniper meta, I think that it's relatively overdue. The Kar 98K from Modern Warfare and the Swiss K31 from Cold War have been by and far the most dominant and easy-to-use snipers here with this for the last year plus. So to have these change, it makes sense. But as for the changes, they're substantial even to the fundamental degree. Per Raven, they ended up saying the adoption of 150 health in Battle Royale resulted in a huge boom to the sniper category. While all other weapons require an additional shot or two, snipers remain as they did previously. The long-standing one-shot rule unfortunately diluted the sniper class into one important metric: speed to click heads. As mentioned, snipers may now use damage ranges as a defining characteristic of their one-shot potential. This not only brings more identity to each weapon, but means attachments that provide the lighter and quicker sniper rifles, the damage range stat will increase their ability to do one shot at increased distances. Our ultimate goal is to enable a wider range of viable playstyles and really push the potential of each weapon. Keep an eye out as we expect further adjustments to sniper rifles as we hone in on the best all-around experience. Now, they mentioned that the following sniper rifles then will only deal one headshot lethal damage in their max damage ranges: the Kar 98K from Modern Warfare, the SPR from Modern Warfare, the Pellington, Swiss K31, and Tundra from Black Ops Cold War, and the Type 99 and Kar 98K in Vanguard. Then, the weapons that will deal one-shot lethal damage to the head at any range are the HDR and AX50 from Modern Warfare, the ZRG 20mm from Black Ops Cold War, and the 3-line rifle and the Gorenko anti-tank rifle from Vanguard. Now, that's not all the snipers in the game, so that means that the Rytek, the Dragunov, and the M82 don't deal one-shot potential damage to the head anymore at all. But to give you a little bit more accurate representations here of the specific details, to save you guys the droning description of every single weapon being tuned, we'll put it up on screen here in a scrolling fashion for you guys. But what you can really take away from it is that those weapons that can one-shot at any range, that's going to be something where you see predominantly the headshot multiplier increase, where it will always sort of have that retaining property to it, where it will get you over that max damage necessary. The other weapons that will be able to end up eliminating players in that damage range, they end up seeing things like their minimum and maximum damage values increase because they only go out to that max damage range. The multiplier is what will kind of push it over the edge and allow for that everlasting one-shot potential. And then the weapons like the Dragunov that can't do one-shot potential at any range, they'll see some minimal increases to that minimum and max damage, but again, not enough to really down a player with one singular shot. So that kind of stuff is really important to take away in regards to those changes to the fundamental underlying factors of sniper rifles. And I'm very curious to see how this will actually shape up the meta, because this now takes out those two weapons that are the by and far favorites of the sniper category of the Kar 98K from Modern Warfare and the Swiss K31 from Black Ops Cold War, and now sort of changes the entire landscape of this to where you might start to see the AX50 come back as a prominent sniper because it has better mobility than the HDR, but still has the ability to do that one-shot damage. Whereas by comparison, I always go back to the Modern Warfare and Black Ops Cold War subsequent metas. When you have that Modern Modern Warfare Kar 98K, those handling properties that Raven stressed on are really the only things that made it better than the AX-50 in terms of taking it. The AX-50 was honestly a decent weapon within Modern Warfare's main year of support when there were no other competitive sniper rifles out there, but now to have to transition back, you might start to see that landscape and what you want to choose change drastically. Now, outside of the snipers, there's still a plenty number of weapons that were tuned here in terms of this overarching meta shift here for Season 3. One of the big ones, though, that you definitely will be interested in hearing about is, of course, that main dominant weapon that's been there since the very beginning, the Bren. This was finally attacked, and we'll see how well this holds up in probably like the next 24, 36 to 48 hours of gameplay, but the Bren ended up having substantial changes on paper, at least. For this, we ended up seeing the max damage was decreased to 32, which was down from 34. That's the difference in about a shot here with that, and then the minimum damage was decreased to 28, down from 30. But the Sakura 40-round magazine had a recoil control decrease down to 14%. Previously, it was at 20%, and that vertical recoil was decreased from 14 down from 18. The Scepter and the Royal Barrels ended up having their recoil control decreased, and the tight grip weapon perk ended up having its recoil control greatly decreased. So this is something that they even said it's overstayed its welcome as the go-to long-range choice, so it's definitely something you'll see change. Now, before I jump over into everything else here, in regards to the weapon categories of the LMGs, we saw some adjustments additionally made to the Whitley, where the minimum damage was actually increased to 31, up from 30. It had a decrease, though, in that ADS speed slightly. The 45-round magazine for the 303 rounds had a fire rate increase of about 3% here, and the Gracie Mark 9 barrel had a speed penalty decrease down to 11% instead of where it was previously at 18. So that might be one that you might want to check out, but it probably won't be replacing the Bren if that's what you're thinking. Outside of that, some of the rifle play got adjusted here. The STG had a handful of its attachments adjusted. The 30 Russian short 45-round magazine had a nerf to everything in terms of damage range, horizontal recoil, and vertical recoil control, with a slight buff to the visual recoil being decreased, so making it a little bit easier on that bounce. The Grenko 50-round magazine had a damage range penalty removed, and the bullet velocity penalty also removed as well. The 622mm barrel had a bullet velocity increase and damage range increase, while the 320mm barrel had an increase to the bullet velocity, damage range, and the added benefit of the reduction in the initial firing recoil penalty. That was actually lowered a little bit more there as well, making that a buff overall, though that attachment also had the horizontal recoil control penalty increased. Now finally, the 760mm barrel had its damage range and bullet velocity also increased. The Itcher Burst had a handful of attachments where it increased the round capacity on the 303 British rounds, the Sakura round magazine, the 8mm Klauser rounds, and the 8mm Klauser 38 round drum mag. So looking to potentially make that a little bit more viable in some situations. The Volkstrom Gewehr had bullet velocity and damage range penalties removed from the Grenko 30 and 40 round magazines. The 428mm, the 407mm, and the 287mm barrels ended up having some buffs to those, though the 287mm also had a nerf in regards to the horizontal recoil and vertical recoil control. Now the Vargo, I'm bummed about this one. My favorite go-to rifle here in regards to the long-range meta did end up getting quite a number of adjustments here, and all nerfs. The majority of these dealing with the barrels. You're going to have more recoil, horizontal and vertical, on the reinforced barrel, the takedown barrel, task force barrel, and the liberator barrel. The foregrip also had a 50% reduction in how much control you end up getting for the horizontal recoil control, and the Spetsnaz grip had a nerf to the horizontal recoil and vertical recoil controls. So substantial changes here to this. Definitely going to be something that you want to maybe look at a different rifle if you are a Vargo fan. The XM4 had a minimum damage decrease, but also a maximum damage range increase. So that one is a little bit offsetting, but not too terribly. A slight nerf, but you might not notice it as much. We saw the pistols of the Top Break and the Diamatis changed here a little bit. The Top Break had a max, mid, and minimum damage increase, and the Diamati ended up having its headshot damage multiplier decreased to 1.49. I promise we're getting to the end of these notes here in regards to the changes, but the Armaguerra ended up having some buffs and nerfs here to it. On the 8mm 72 round magazine, the fire rate was decreased down to 10% of a bonus instead of 15, but it also now increases the damage by 5%, whereas it did not before. Now the short barrel also ends up having an adjustment here where the bullet velocity and recoil control penalties were decreased, but the visual recoil was also decreased. So some nerfs and buffs to that one. The Type 100 had its visual recoil decreased, which is certainly interesting, though the 8mm 48 round Kurz magazine had some nerfs to the damage multiplier and the movement speed. So that was the part that really made that weapon stand out. So you might notice a substantial difference here in that. The Owen gun had a couple of nerfs here as well to a few of the magazines and to a certain barrel. The Gorenko 33 round magazine had its neck damage multiplier decreased, while the 72 round Gorenko magazine had its head and neck damage multipliers decreased. The Hawkinson barrel ended up having its fire rate decreased on that bonus to 16%, which is down from 19. So some subtle changes, but definitely could make some difference here. And the MP40, in terms of the SMGs, had the short barrel. That minimum damage was decreased to 23, down from 24, which made it substantial. Probably going to add another shot here into the mix that's required. And the upper and lower torso damage multipliers was decreased down from 1.1 to 1.04. Again, another substantial but minor change here to this on paper. The MP40, though, might be slipping back into irrelevancy. Again, actual gameplay time is going to determine here how that actually fits in a live environment. And finally, in terms of overall weapons, the M1 Garand from Vanguard had its lower limit damage multiplier increased to 0.8, up from 0.7. So adding a slight change to that damage profile that can result in one less shot to kill if all shots are on the limb. Now, as for attachments, overall, we ended up seeing the subsonic ammunition. That bullet velocity penalty is now removed, so that might be something somewhat viable, keeping you off the radar, but also not requiring you to take a silencer in the muzzle category. And speaking of muzzles, rounding out everything here, the Mercury silencer, that damage range penalty was now removed, and the MX silencer now decreases the sprint to fire speed by 2% and also increases the damage range by 10%. So interesting trade-offs for sure here with this, and some big changes overall to specific weapons, specific attachments, and specific ammo types. So that said, that is the meta changes here that Raven made, some very substantial ones. Again, it all comes down to how it feels in game though. So the next 24 to 36 to 48 hours, of course, I'm gonna be grinding out the game here, giving you guys my thoughts and opinions, getting you guys enough information so that you can make your own informed decisions as well. But for the time being, that's where we're at. So let me know your thoughts down below. How do you like these changes? Do you think they're good, bad, maybe not so much? Whatever the case, drop it down below. But if you enjoyed the video, do me a favor and drop a like on the video. And if you're new to the channel, hit the subscribe button so you don't miss a single thing regarding all things Warzone, Vanguard, Season 3, and maybe even some Modern Warfare 2 stuff here coming up very, very soon. If you guys are at all interested in any of that, hit the subscribe button. I'd love to have you in the community. That said, thanks so much for watching. My name is Espresso. I'll see you guys later. Take care and peace.